Why did so much go wrong in tech in 2022?
And are things going to get any better in 2023? Vertical Hold is proudly brought to you by Aussie Broadband, changing the game with their award-winning network and Australian-based support. Hey there, welcome back to Vertical Hold Behind the Tech News, the award-winning tech podcast where we catch up with Australia's leading technology journalists to dive into the big tech stories of the week. I'm Adam Turner, and I'm joined for the very last time in 2022 by Mr. Alex Kidman. Now, Alex, in my house, it's not Christmas until we see Hans Gruber fall off Nakatomi Plaza. What's the big sign in your house to let everyone know that it's the season?
Look, 6 simple words. Light the lamp, not the rat.
Call it a hunch, but I thought that might be where you're going. So it's the big show for the year. We're doubling down on guests. And first, we've got a longtime friend of the show and freelance extraordinaire, Alice Clark. Alice, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me, friends.
Which movie says Christmas in your house?
So my wife is obsessed with terrible Hallmark Christmas movies, but the two main ones we watch every year are Happiest Season and Season of Love. I wouldn't say they're particularly good, but they're both nice romantic comedies, and Kristen Stewart looks hot in a suit, so it's great for everyone.
So no Muppets, no gunplay?
Look, like a little bit of Muppets Christmas Carol, but I overdid that as a kid. Really, it's not Christmas until the lesbians start making out.
Fair enough. We're also joined by an even longer time friend of the show. It's Finders Angus Kidman. Gus, which movie says Christmas at your place?
See, I'm not a movie person, I'm a TV person. So what says Christmas to me is Euthanasia, which is the Christmas episode of The Goodies, where the world is going to end at midnight.
Well,
Where I believe they end up at Christmas 1980, just to show you how old that show is.
Absolutely, and that's when they've been travelling forward in time. But I thoroughly recommend it, and it does have a passing Muppets reference in it. So.
That's true.
Well, 2022 has kind of felt like the world was going to end at midnight for pretty much the entire year, I would say, especially in the tech department. From privacy breaches, social media meltdowns, crypto implosions, broadband breakdowns, it seems whatever could go wrong did go wrong. Now, Gus, I would say that 2022 will go down as, no, not year of Linux on the desktop, but year of the data breach. Do you think that it will get any worse or any better in 2023? Can we turn it around?
In terms of data breaches, absolutely not. I think now that we're in a heightened state of data breach awareness now, I think we're going to go through in Australia, certainly, another 6 to 12 months where every time there's a data breach, we're going to hear about it. And I think just in the order of probability, we're probably going to see at least 2 more that are at the same scale as the 2 really big ones we had this year with Optus and Medibank. So I have no good cheer to bring on that topic whatsoever because I'm absolutely convinced that it's going to stay just as bad as it's been.
Alice, do you think, well, if Gus is right and we're at heightened awareness, is that in itself a good thing, this idea that we're a little bit more aware about our data? Because let's face it, 2022's data breach, just Optus being the big example, certainly kind of brought it to the forefront.
Yeah, look, being aware of a problem is great. Like, if my house is on fire and I'm aware of that, it means I can do something. But my awareness is only really useful if I actually do something rather than going, wow, that's bad. And at the moment, I think we're at the wow, that's bad of doing stuff about it. And hopefully one day soon, somebody will actually, I don't know, make some regulations about how much data companies are allowed to store on us, how companies have to deal with that data, and maybe make it so it's bad for them if they get lazy and put it on a public-facing API.
Well, that's a good point, what Alice is saying about what the government could do. They've already talked about making the penalties worse, but that doesn't actually help us, does it? Have they talked? So we've heard a lot of ideas about what they could do, but is there any talk about the government actually forcing new standards on the way that data is collected or stored or disposed?
Sadly, no. Like, as you say, there's been a lot of high-level hand-waving and saying, yes, we want to crack down on this. We expect companies to do better. But it's hard to conclude that I think, that that's going to improve much because even in areas where we know there's huge regulatory problems, it takes forever for legislation to catch up. I think about the sort of Financial Services Royal Commission, which is going back now 3 or 4 years now, and they're still trying to work out what to do about that. So I do think we need better legislation, but I'm not confident that it's going to end up at the forefront. And in the meantime, the onus is still going to be on consumers to try and deal as best they can with these issues as they arise.
That awareness might actually be hitting companies where it hurts, though. And that might be a net positive gain. And I'm thinking here of TPG. They recently had a breach through iiNet, if memory serves, and their share price tumbled, which would have hurt them. So I think if we see more of that kind of thing, more of this kind of awareness of, hey, these data breaches are financially bad, then maybe it becomes less of a cost-cutting exercise to fire all the security admins and more of a cost-saving one.
Absolutely. And I mean, the hip pocket counts. I mean, we know from Finder research that about 5% of Optus customers have actually made the switch as a result of the data breach. And that's depressing because it means a lot of people haven't. At the same time, in the cutthroat world of mobile phones, if you've lost 5% of your market, that's really, really bad for you. They don't have a lot of room for error there. So in some ways, that's the greatest power I think consumers have, is to say, I'm not going to deal with a business that obviously hasn't done this very well.
The problem is, though, that Optus got caught out, but we don't know that any of the other companies are actually doing it better. I mean, Telstra recently had to admit that, we accidentally, 50,000 customers' details in the white pages, even though they had asked not to be.
But they paid not to be. I mean, that's the extraordinary thing. It's you're literally getting the opposite of the service that they asked for. So for sure, it's not like you're not necessarily littered with lots of good alternative choices, and that is a real problem.
We're also not guaranteed that the financial costs of paying fines or having their share price temporarily tumble is really going to add up to as much as they would have to pay to not keep our data, which presumably they find useful in some way, and to keep it properly, which is presumably expensive. We have to make it more expensive to screw up than it is to look after it properly. But then on the flip side, you have companies then saying, well, if I don't report it, then I have no repercussions, and hopefully no one will notice. It's just
I believe Catch did that a few years back.
At some point, human collateral needs to stop just being the price of doing business, and it needs. We need better watchdogs, and we need less data to be kept on us. And generally, all of it's bad, and it's very depressing, and we should all go live in the hills and unplug our devices. I'm not going to, but somebody else should.
Well, speaking of devices, it wouldn't be Vertical Hold without a chat around smartphones and gadgets and devices. And 2021 was kind of the, chip shortage, pandemic, everything's all kind of screwed up. Alice, did it get any better in, say, phones, for example? Did phones get more exciting in 2022, do you think?
Phones got slightly better. Not really meaningfully better, but slightly better. The cameras are a bit better. The folding phones made big leaps in that their spec sheets didn't get much fancier, but you can actually, the consumer would actually
more
use
usable
it.
And
yeah, but I do feel like the phone space has stagnated significantly, and there has not been an exciting new release aside from folding in a long time. And maybe phone companies should either think about if they need to release a phone this year if there isn't something exciting about it. They won't, but they should.
Are there other areas in gadgets where people were at least innovating or trying things, whether or not they succeeded?
Yes. Dyson announced the weirdest product I have ever covered in my entire career. And I've seen some weird stuff, friends. When Dyson revealed the Dyson Zone in a briefing that was I think it was like February or March, and I had to keep it a secret for a month. It nearly killed me. If you're not familiar with the Dyson Zone, it's a pair of big noise-canceling headphones, which, quite a normal product, except for the part where there's a visor that goes around your face as a personal air purifier to deal with the problem of bad air quality. Not to deal with anything to do with pandemics, just bad air quality. And so there's big fans attached to your ears, which is what the noise cancelling is trying to cancel out. I've used a prototype. They hadn't nailed it at that point. It's going to be really big in China and countries with bad air quality. I think tomorrow, when I wear my prototype version out in the city for the first time, if I don't get beaten up, I'll be surprised. It's
I thought
weird.
you'd look pretty scary because you look a lot like Bane, I think, from Batman. I think they owe that guy some licensing money.
See, I think it looks more like the Petty Sedate, which was a very niche accessory for the Nintendo Game Boy for dentists, and they'd put it on children and it would give them an anesthetic to sedate them. That's what it looks like. Or it
Is
looks
this
like
a real thing? Surely this is not.
it is a real thing.
Okay.
They actually made it. Google it right now. Pause the podcast.
Okay.
Just
Is
Google
this one of those
and
game
watch this
shows
video.
where you've got to guess which one is fake? Because I guess that one.
No, it's real, friends.
We have a line up,
but yeah,
we
it
have a line
also
up with that, the Game Boy sewing machine. There's all sorts of the NES piano. There's all sorts of stupid gaming accessories. We could
it's
do
a
an
good
entire
time.
separate podcast.
But yeah, I went to Malmesbury in England. Kind of Dyson took me over there to see how it all worked, and that was really interesting because basically every room they took me to, they're like, "We originally built this for the car. The car failed, so now we're making face-mounted air purifiers." It's like,
Yes.
yeah, that's the logical step to take. Can't have a car, get a head-mounted air purifier. Sure, why not? It's 2022. Anything can happen.
It reminds me of that weird, and I cannot remember the name of the thing, but the Razer face mask that they were doing, and that was a pandemic one that had the
Yes.
RGB lighting in it as well. And I remember looking at that and thinking, well, if this is the future, maybe I should opt out.
I wanted that mask so much because I'm still wearing an N95 mask everywhere I go
Sensible. Yep.
indoors. I think having it light up would also be fun because why not at that point? This is taking it to a different level and it's trying to solve a different problem. Like, admittedly, the WHO says 7 million people die a year due to air pollution. That seems bad. I'm not entirely sure if the solution to that is making more products for rich people to buy rather than, I don't know, reducing the amount of waste and pollution we put into the air. But as far as what Dyson can do to solve the problem, this is a very Dyson way to solve that problem.
I was going to say it's Dyson. They're presumably not giving them away. Do we have an idea on pricing for this thing?
I don't think there's an official pricing, but I know it is definitely going to be more expensive than the AirPods Max, and the number I've heard float around is $1,400. And look, I've spent some time. I spent like 20 minutes listening to the final version, and for $1,400, I would want the sound quality to be a little bit better than that, and the fan sound to be a little bit quieter than that, and for the visor to make my chin less cold.
Good
That's just
feedback
me.
from Model 2.
Yeah.
I have
You
already.
know my biggest concern about this product? Rule 34.
What is it?
Rule 34.
Look,
Maybe we won't go there right away, Gus.
I spend a lot of time on Tumblr, Gus, and I don't think they need to know about the Dyson Zone to make Rule 34 content that looks like this.
Well,
Actually,
I mean, rolling...
I've just figured out. Sorry, I'm running on a satellite delay here. I just took an educated guess at what Rule 34 is. Yeah.
Don't Google it, people.
No.
If
Yeah.
ignorance is bliss.
Yes.
But, well, speaking of ignorance and perhaps bliss, this was also the year of crypto, but not the year of good crypto. Gus, we saw a lot of kind of crashes and catastrophes and FTXs and everything else kind of going wrong in crypto. Am I just being too negative here?
No, I think that's a fair summary of it. I think we really did. We hit the point with crypto that has been sort of predicted for a while, which was it's a bit like for us old timers. It is. It's the dot-com boom again. It's the point at which you realize that 90% of these things are just going to fail miserably. And out of that, there'll be a handful of things that will probably do quite well, but won't end up being remotely, the thing that they thought. And also, something that was originally conceived as something that was massively decentralized and that was supposed to be liberating and totally change the thing has turned out to be yet another thing that capitalism has just sucked dry and ruined the planet for in the process. So I think, that's pretty much where it landed. It wasn't the the one positive thing that I think you could say that happened this year that sort of showed that you don't always have to make it so was we did see Ethereum make its shift from proof of work to proof of stake, and that does have good environmental benefits. So that it proved it can be done. On the other hand, that's the only major crypto that's kind of made that shift, and there's no hint that Bitcoin's going to do it. So yeah, I think the notion that that there's going to be some great world utopia through this has been pretty summarily dismissed. Doesn't mean it's disappeared. Doesn't mean that we're just going to see no crypto going on. There's lots of people got money in it. It's going to keep going, but I think the guilt really has come off the gingerbread, to use a seasonal reference that I can shoehorn in there.
So I would assume we still have the blockchain evangelists who, even as crypto might be going to hell, are still arguing that that's their fault and that blockchain is still the answer for everything.
You do have those, but they've taken a bit of a beating this year too. I'm thinking particularly of the ASX in Australia, which had ran this massive project trying to convert its CHESS system, which monitors all the trades, onto the blockchain. They spent, it was something north of $250 million on it, and then gave up on it completely. Like, I think it doesn't mean that there's not some conceptually interesting stuff there, but it's getting harder to argue for those outcomes at the moment.
So, Alice, could I interest you in some vertical hold coin? It's the hot new crypto.
Well, I'm sure it has the exact same value as most of those other cryptocurrencies do, so sign me up.
Possibly slightly less. This is not financial advice.
Who would have thought
crypto is not a
that
financial product.
Who would have thought that a new form of capital would be ruined by capitalism, and that a specific currency set up to not be regulated and to be used for various illegal dealings would have failed so badly? Who could have seen that coming, aside from everyone? What a mystery.
Well, friends, I think it's time for us to reach the soup course, the soup du jour of vertical hold, which for such a long time has been the NBN, broadband, the telco scene in Australia. Because in theory, we should, all be sitting in a land of really, really high speed broadband for all. It hasn't really panned out that way, has it?
Did we get tickets to New Zealand and no one told me?
Shh.
Yeah, we were supposed to be at the point where the NBN was done and dusted and maybe thinking about version 2. Instead, we're still mending version 1, and we'll be mending version 1 for a long time. It was, the big significant development for the NBN was the one that happened quite late in the year, which has been discussed on the podcast quite recently, which is we have had this kind of acknowledgement, hey, maybe we don't have to treat this as a business we're going to sell. Maybe we can just say this was a utility and we don't have to say it's going to turn a profit. I think if that sticks, that really is going to change the way the NBN looks in the future. So it's an important development. So we've had that happen. We've had the suggestion that we might get away from the dreaded CVC method of payment, which every single service provider absolutely hates. So there are actually glimmers of interesting things happening on the horizon, but it's after a year that was very much business as usual. And hey, this thing is not doing really well because all the design flaws that have been talked about ad nauseum are still there.
I'm just really glad that I managed to get my building on the Digitech network. That was probably the best thing that happened to my infrastructure in the last 2 years, because I went from paying, I think it was like $90 a month to maybe get 100 down with NBN, to paying $70 a month to get 500 up and down.
Nice.
I quite like it.
If NBN had been done properly in the first place, would those kind of other providers just not have come along because there wouldn't be those gaps for them to cherry pick?
I don't think they would have needed to, but I think there still would have been a market, because they still would have been cheaper than NBN, because NBN has to service rural areas, and me in the CBD, I don't have to do that.
I was going to say, I think in Melbourne CBD and the CBD of most of Australia's capital cities, there's probably enough business interest in really fast fibre that those kinds of services probably would have still existed regardless. But the private thing, also brings up things like Starlink, which we saw launch here. And we've got an episode on that as well, which people should go and listen to. So that competitive scene is looking interesting. But at the same time, in the telco space, and this is actually quite current as to when we're recording this, the ACCC's laid down a fairly big determination, hasn't it, Adam?
Yeah, the ACCC has said to Telstra and TPG that they cannot do their big regional network deal, where I think the basic way it was going to go is Telstra was going to let TPG, Vodafone, TPG, a phone,
Hmm.
use some of their regional towers, and in return, Vodafone, TPG, was going to let Telstra use some of the spectrum that they bought, which is great for both of them. But then the argument is it good for us as the end consumers? And the ACCC said a big fat no and won't let them do it.
Yeah. And a very emphatic no, which I thought was interesting. That they didn't just go, "Oh, look, this is a tough one." They said, "No, on both the principal grounds we have to assess this decision on. This is a terrible idea." I've seen a lot of initial hand wringing, people going, "Oh, this is terrible for regional users. They get more competition," which I just think shows people didn't actually read the announcement, because the reasoning is really clear.
Yeah.
The reasoning is that once you put all that spectrum in the hands of just one company, we have some evidence of what happens when we let Telstra control all the access in an area, and it ain't good. So
Yes.
I think, in this case, I'm very much of the view that, hey, that was a wise decision, because we only ever have limited competition for these services in Australia. We're never going to have the level of competition a larger country again, but it is good to have some competition. So, and in the same way that it's good to have those fibre options that go up against the NBN, it's also good to say, hey, we can't have all of this locked down. Yeah, when there's only really 3 networks anyway, you don't want 2 of them to get merged together. It's just not going to work out well.
But when the ACCC makes these rulings because they don't want things to go a certain way, that doesn't necessarily mean what they want to happen will happen. And the one I'm thinking about is, let me see if I can get this right. TPG was supposed to build a 4th network, and then it wanted to get out of that deal and get into bed with someone else. And the
Vodafone,
ACCC,
in this case, yep.
with Vodafone, the ACCC said no, because we want TPG to build that 4th network to be competitive. And then in the end, they didn't build it anyway. Am I remembering it correctly?
You're omitting out the fact that they actually fought the ACCC and won in order to be able to merge with Vodafone,
Yeah.
which was the other contentious point there. But look, you're not broadly wrong. I suppose the thing with competition, Gus, is that in theory, and I suppose this is what the ACCC wants, it should lead to better service outcomes and cheaper prices for consumers. Lots of people, Alice being a good example, are not happy with the prices we pay for broadband, with the prices we pay for mobile phone service. Do you think that's going to get better next year?
No, not next year, because even some of these changes we're seeing for things like CVC, they roll in very gradually, only on the high speed plans, and they don't really kick in for a couple of years. And there's a certain amount of inertia in this pricing. Like, we are not talking massive margins on most of these services. Now, the one which arguably might be an exception would actually be Starlink, because Starlink, for all that it's, people use it, say it's a great service, but it's fantastically overpriced. Like, you have to be wealthy to be affording to having that as your main connection service. At the same time, they have spent a small fortune on sending out satellites. So I'm not necessarily saying they're profitable either. But unfortunately, I don't think it's the case that we're going to see wholesale drops in prices. At the same time, it's the case now, as it always has been, that, the cheapest plans you get on any of these things are not going to be going with one of the big guys. That's been true for years, and it remains true now, and I'm confident that'll be true in 2 years' time. If you want a cheap service, it will not be from one of the big brands.
So speaking of, sort of a bit of fragmentation and lots of little players, the streaming scene has just got to the point where there are so many streaming services. We're back to the bad old days of, instead of having to hand over a shed load of money to Foxtel to watch everything you want, you got to hand over a shed load of money to everybody to watch everything that you want. Alice, has this gone too far, or are we seeing new kinds of streaming niche services that we actually need?
I think it has both gone too far, and I think that it's allowed a rise for good niche services. I think the fact that I need to be subscribed to like 6 different services to see the shows that I want to watch is ridiculous. I may as well have just gotten cable. I think the fact that they're now wholesale deleting original shows that they've paid for and that aren't available anywhere else just so they can take it off their books is cultural vandalism. I am appalled at what's happening with that. But on the other hand, there's some really cool niche services now that cater exactly to my interests, and that's all I want. So, swings and roundabouts, I guess.
Were there any services that came along this year that particularly caught your eye?
Yeah, so Diva Box Office launched on the 1st of December, and it's a really interesting product that I don't think is quite populated enough yet for most people's interests, but it's specifically catering to the audience of queer women who have previously been very underserved. Like, I spent my teen years watching entire runs of shows just so I can get 2 episodes during sweeps where one girl would kiss another girl before being killed. Happened a lot. Whereas this is a service where she'll always get the girl and they'll usually live happily ever after, and sometimes they'll even solve crimes, and I enjoy that. What's interesting about Diva Box Office is that it's by the same person who is behind Tello Films, which is basically the exact same kind of streaming service, but she split with her business partners and then launched this competitor, and then there's a third one called Lesflix. And this is all great for me because now there's more content that I can enjoy, but also now there's fragmentation in that market, and that's odd.
I would imagine you need the economies of scale for this to work, though. Like you probably wouldn't set this up if it was a service just in Australia.
No, absolutely not. Most of these services are surprisingly based out of the UK. I would have expected, like Tello is American, but Diva Box Office and Lesflix are both based in the UK. There are none based in Australia. We do not have that level of market, though. The Queer Film Festival in Sydney does occasionally do some streaming stuff as part of the film festival.
Do you think that the mainstream providers are getting better? Can some of the people who have more niche interest more likely to find the things they're looking for on your Netflixes, your Amazons, your Disneys, your Paramounts?
So Netflix and Amazon are actually doing really well in terms of having shows with representation. Some big ones this year were The Wilds, Warrior Nun, A League of Their Own. A League of Their Own is brilliant. But all of those shows have been cancelled. It's been a big couple of years where big streaming services will bring out really amazing shows with representation and then cancel them after one season. Even if the viewership is there, even if it is in the top 5 most watched shows on streaming, they will still cancel it. And I do not understand what their economy thing is. I also think, as a general thing, the big streaming companies have gotten worse. It is too fragmented. Netflix was great when they were the only option and all the big studios had to go there, so you could just subscribe to this one thing, you could get everything you wanted, and then you were happy. Then Disney wanted their own cut of the pie, and suddenly everyone has decided they're a streaming service, and they're all losing money on it. So we're going to see half of them close down in the next couple of years because it's not sustainable. Especially because all of this fragmentation is leading people to put their pirate hats back on. That's the only way you can watch all of these shows.
We hit that really crucial point this year, and I think this was the real flick moment, was that moment when Netflix lost subscribers for the first time, because as long as it looked like a growth business, they were kind of happy just flinging things out there. And the minute that happened, not only did Netflix say, right, well, we're going to cut back on original production, we're going to introduce an ad-supported tier, we're going to do a bunch of things we said we wouldn't do, but the same logic has been permeating through all the big guys. It's like this realization that there is not infinite growth, which again, you'd think we'd know this by now, but as we've discussed a couple of times during this episode, capitalism is pretty stupid. It doesn't learn these lessons easily.
But also, Netflix has never turned a profit. None of these streaming services have.
I wanted to jump back just briefly into your discussion of niche audiences, because I think it's something for the big streamers where they get it, but slowly. And it takes a long time and a fair bit of pain. And the example that I'd use is the way that they've covered anime services. Because for the longest time they had virtually nothing, and then they'd have maybe 1 or 2 things, and then services like Crunchyroll got very, very big, very, very quickly, and suddenly Netflix is pursuing deals in Japan and chasing up that kind of content. They've got an entire subcategory for it. There is hope, I suppose, but it takes way, way too long for it to actually happen. Gus, I also wanted to touch on the ad tier. I mean, we're talking about these services never making money. Ads obviously make you money, but do we think this is the future of streaming? Are we just inevitably rolling back towards a Foxtel style service where we are paying for it and there are ads and we'll just grin and bear it?
I think that is going to end up being a chunk of it. So certainly, so far, there's some initial adoption figures now around where the ad tier has rolled out, and it hasn't been massively popular. And there was never the assumption it was going to be the major sort of element of it. But there's sort of figures that are floating around suggest that maybe between 5 and 10% of people will switch into that if they have the option. But you have seen at the same time, you've seen the parallel rise of these services that come out that are that come from existing broadcasters, where they start doing lots of specialist online only channels, but they're still you watch what's on. And Paramount in Australia launched a bunch of these. There's a channel where you can just watch the original Prisoner, as in the 1980s soap, non-stop. It's running 24 hours a day. It's just on all the time. And so I think that's an interesting kind of spin, but that has ads in it. There's no way you'll get that without ads. So there's always going to be a space, I think, for people repurposing that stuff. And look, I'd rather they repurposed it and kept showing it than they went down that horrible other alternative path of, as Alice was saying, taking things off the air and then they're just nowhere. You can't get at them at all. But I'd probably rather have them out there with an annoying ad in them than just have them completely inaccessible.
I think this is going to be a really interesting year to see how many streaming services survive. And I think you're probably going to see, obviously, Netflix and Disney, absolutely, they're going to stick around. Amazon Prime was never supposed to be a streaming service that you'd buy by yourself. It's just a perk to get you to buy the Amazon Prime free shipping, because then you buy more stuff from Amazon. Same with Apple TV Plus. That was never going to make money by itself. That is just a gift with purchase. But everything else, if I was somebody who bet on things, I would start putting money down on how long before they were absorbed by other services or just shut down completely. That's going to be the interesting thing.
So the homegrown obvious example there would be Stan. Does Stan have legs, do we think?
No, I think Stan is going to have a tricky... I think Stan's got legs for the next 2 years, but after that, I think it really is going to run into the problem that, like, if it can't get a certain amount of supply from those big brands, then, it's really going to struggle to maintain that. I mean, in some ways, Stan letting into Stan Sport isn't the dumbest thing it's done, because we certainly know that in Australia, people will pay for sport in a way they won't pay for a lot of other things. But I think, it seems evident that Stan is going to have a rocky road ahead for it, and that maybe the best outcome it could have is to be acquired or merged into, maybe, if HBO really got annoyed with Foxtel and said, look, we'll go and merge with Stan and use that as a launch, because HBO Max feels like it might have a chance here. But also, I suppose since Malk's not here, I better say, look, someone could relaunch Presto. That's always possible. So,
it's never coming back.
Well,
it's never coming back.
Bringing the sport in is really the smartest move that Stan could make, because if you look at the ratings on regular linear TV just exists for there to be sport, and then there happens to be like 14 or 16 hours of original programming a week as decoration. Sport is all anyone watches on free-to-air, no matter the country. And sport is what people are most willing to pay for. And so if they lean more heavily into that, then that is probably going to be their savior, which is why I think Binge would die before Stan did.
But Binge will merge with KO is what will happen there.
I don't know if Binge would merge with KO, or if they just keep KO and keep money and then keep Foxtel and then just kill Binge.
There'll be different labels on the same outcome, possibly. Yeah, because the other thing people will watch on free-to-air to some extent is news, but they won't necessarily pay for that. And Flash is still there, technically. Anyone watched Flash recently?
I would guess Flash has the same level of viewership as... What was that reality show that aired last week? It was like Race to Become Famous, and it had 0 viewers in Brisbane. That's probably what Flash is doing.
That was The Challenge, I think. But
yes.
See, I would have thought Binge might survive simply because it's more or less Foxtel's way of saying, look, we still want some of your money, please.
Yeah.
I don't know. I genuinely don't know, and I don't even know if they make these financials available, what the marginal extra cost of them running Binge really is. It may well be that the Binge part is profitable.
They're not investing much into Binge.
Yeah, it's complicated because the rights are hard because they're paying for the rights for the cable service as well. So to some extent, it's not easy to pull that money out, but you do wonder.
But then there's the same with Channel 9 just doing retransmission stuff onto Stan, because 9 owns Stan. Binge isn't in 4K even yet, and I'm wondering when that's going to become a problem for them.
They'll wait a good long while because, again, it just upsells Foxtel.
Yeah,
exactly. I think they don't view that as a problem. They view it as an opportunity.
But I view it as a problem, and that's what matters to me.
Sure. For sure. Well, look, speaking of problems, it feels like we spent the last month talking about social media. And our good friend, Mr. Musk, he's been a real headline gatherer, especially in the latter half of the year. But we've been talking all show long about technology getting broken. Is there a more broken technology at the moment than Twitter, Alice?
Maybe Musk's ego? Like, that's got to be feeling
Can
pretty
anything
bruised at the
dent that?
moment. I don't know. Musk, it is nice for the rest of the world to finally be seeing Musk for what he is. He's not a man who invents things. He doesn't even seem to be a particularly bright man. He's just rich and he buys stuff. And he seems to be fairly good at buying stuff, kind of, except for Twitter. But I don't like having to deal with this man. Twitter is not designed to have the same main character for this long. And I do not care about Musk. He makes crap cars. He nearly messed up PayPal, and now he is breaking Twitter. He's ruining the night sky with Starlink. I just want him to go away and give me back my silly website where I have memes.
Well,
All of that's going to be controversial, so please enjoy those comments.
Bounce off that.
Well, okay, so we did see the suggestion, because he fired nearly everyone, that Twitter was going to fall over. It hasn't fallen over yet. Gus, do you think it will?
I think it would. I think, yeah, that notion that it was going to spectacularly implode hasn't happened yet. I'm not using Twitter anywhere near as much as I was, but whenever I'm on there, it's flaky in ways it wasn't flaky before. It's not doing great at
Flaky
suggesting
is
other things.
kind.
Yeah, there are points at which you go in there and all your replies have disappeared. Like, there's just all these things that just make it less and less appealing. So, bad products can hang around for a really long time.
Like Tesla's.
Yeah. So I think it seems to me, in a year's time, I still think Twitter will probably be there in some form. It may have at that point been sold off to a venture capitalist who's then trying to gut it and do something else with it. But I just think, its capacity to grow is what I think has actually disappeared. I think now it is just going to be a shrinking pool. It's still a big enough pool that shrinking pool could last for a while, but there are some parallels to when we're talking about streaming and talking about Foxtel and those things. A lot of those services survive. They won't disappear immediately, but they've passed their point of peak cultural relevance. And I think, sadly, I think that's what's happened to Twitter. I think it's that ship has sailed. So I don't think it's going to explode, but it's never going to be as relevant as it had been in a broad social sense for, say, probably the last 5 years. That ship has sailed.
He made a joke about buying it with a weed number because his ex-wife, who played Mary in the 2005 version of Pride and Prejudice, which is a random fact, asked him to buy it after a racist guy was banned for making some racist jokes. It was not destined to do well from that start, and it has gone pretty much as everyone predicted it would, aside from it completely imploding. So, it's nice to be right. Like with crypto, it's just also sad.
Now that he's talking about stepping down as CEO after running one of his infamous polls, will that make any difference, or will he still be Mr. Moneybags in the background?
Jot.
That's what I'm saying.
None
He'll still be able to
whatsoever.
make up the rules as he goes. He's
Absolutely.
sort of
He's-
this is like his way of sort of worming out of the responsibility bit of it, but still being able to do whatever the hell he wants.
he's not. He said he'd abide by his poll, and he hasn't. And I have zero faith that he will in any significant or meaningful way. He will look to sell it. He's losing money on it, but he could lose all the money he's put into it, and he'd still be obscenely wealthy.
But doesn't he owe some people a shitload of money?
If he loses all the money, it'll get fun, because at that point it will. The most impactful stuff that's happening out of Twitter is not what's happening to Twitter; it's what's happening in parallel to the share price for Tesla and what's going on there. And Tesla's had plenty of its own issues before this came along. It's not like it was a perfectly well structured business. It was suffering from supply chain issues. We have to mention supply chain a couple of times in this episode to say
For sure, we've got to keep out of habit. Totally.
Supply
But
chain
my point-
issues and poor build quality. But
Yes.
it's also just... Oh, what was I about to say? Oh, it was going to be so good. I've lost it. Carry on.
Sorry.
Well, I was going to say, it's not as my point is, it's not as though we're going to see Elon living under a bridge anytime soon. As much of a troll as he actually is, he's still going to have a great deal of money. But some of this, of course, comes about because of inertia. People kind of go, oh, well, I'm comfortable on that service. I use that service, therefore I'll keep using that service. Open question to the group. We're tech journalists. We've been writing and talking about how bad Twitter has become and the problems that he's introduced. How many of us have actually changed our social media habits over the past couple of months in relation to Twitter specifically?
I have. I'm on it more. I make bad choices.
To watch the dumpster fire, like up close.
Yeah, to watch the dumpster fire, but also I followed a couple of new people who are really interesting, and all my friends are still there. It's like I kept going to high school until they expelled me, because that's where all my friends were. It wasn't a good school. I wasn't having a good time, but my friends were there. That's what
Twitter
Twitter is
Stockholm
like.
syndrome.
Yeah.
So I've changed, but in the sense that I'm not looking at it as much and I'm posting a lot less. Like I do just feel that, okay, like I'm sort of slowly disengaging from it. I mean, for practical reasons, I wouldn't do that thing of like deleting the account because that's just asking someone else to go and impersonate you. But I do feel like, but then to be fair, I've had the same pattern with Facebook as well. Like I think I'm leaning into that. Okay, maybe being heavily engaged on social media is not something I need to do. So to some extent, I think that same pattern, and that was happening before the dumpster fire that Musk added into the mix, but that for Twitter that accelerated it. But I think there's a change there. But then looking at the engagement numbers, I'm an outlier there. Most people are not doing that.
There was a big rush about a month ago, maybe, where a lot of tech journalists went out, the ones who weren't already on Mastodon and created Mastodon accounts. I'm seeing a lot of them there, but I'm not actually seeing much from them because I've noticed that when I look at it, it's pretty much the same one or two people I see all the time because everyone else I follow are other tech journalists who haven't said anything about except for the initial post of, hey, maybe I should be here. And I'm pretty much fall under that category. I'm not taking the moral high ground here.
So I think the issue here is that so many tech journalists are getting Mastodon wrong because I was going to bring it up. It's probably where I do 70% of my time now. I'm still on Twitter more, I think, because of the professional obligation to kind of watch the dumpster fire. I've discovered, in fact, since Musk's taken over, I've been followed by a hell of a lot of like deeply racist, sexist accounts, a bunch of really dodgy looking porn accounts. It's Twitter's actually become kind of nasty for me, I've got to admit. And Mastodon isn't, but Mastodon is such a build-it-yourself service that if you don't do that, if you don't expand out of that sphere, if you just sit back and wait for it to come to you, very much nothing is going to happen. It is the to give this an Alice spin, it's the unopened box of Lego. There's all the potential in the world, but if you don't do anything with it, then yes, nothing is going to happen, and you're going to say, oh well, nothing happens on Mastodon. I'm having a whale of a time. People look me up on Mastodon. I share wonderful pictures of my cats. They're very cute.
I actually quite like the idea of Mastodon because I feel that the algorithmic approach to social media, to music, to what television we watch is really harmful because it doesn't allow us to properly curate our own online and cultural experiences. It means we stop being curious and looking for stuff and just wait for stuff to find us. I think TikTok is especially harmful for that. However, Mastodon only works for me about 75% of the time. And I'm very happy to curate my own experience. I'm happy to go out and find my own people, but I need it to be easy to find my people and for it to work when I need it to, because I'm very easily distracted. I have 8 other social media accounts, and most of those websites work. If Tumblr is working better than your social media site, you are doing the wrong thing. Tumblr is as broken as you are allowed to be and still have people who aren't massive tech
Mastodon
nerds.
has issues. Some of that, of course, may be the instance that you are upon and its own server load and so on. And again, that's sort of, it's part of the model. It's part of that Lego build it yourself thing. And that is both an opportunity and a problem, as you kind of rightly point out. I suppose where this inevitably comes to, though, is what happens with social media in the next 12 months. We've kind of identified Twitter's probably peaked. Mastodon seems to be growing, but who knows if it's going to hit that kind of critical mass that you need. Where else are we seeing this kind of movement and growth?
ChatGPT, but that's not social media.
I think one thing we need to keep in mind is that So Tumblr seems really important to us. Not Tumblr. What am I saying? One thing that we need to keep in mind is that Twitter seems really important to us because that's where all the journalists are. That's where a lot of the
The ones
newsy
that Musk
people
hasn't
are.
banned. Yes.
Yes, correct. But that's not where most people are. Twitter is not the biggest social media service by a long way. Everybody was already at TikTok and they've just stayed there. It's people like us who are hand wringing over Twitter who are worried about Twitter, and almost nobody else really cares that much. People are just going to go to TikTok. Those of us who are too lazy to make videos will go to Reddit and, to a much lesser extent, Tumblr. And the world will carry on until a new kind of social media where we don't have to be pretty comes up.
The thing that fascinates me about TikTok, and I agree, I think there's a massive audience there that tends not to get discussed in this way, but the geopolitics of TikTok are so complicated. And if we were making predictions about what's going to happen in the following year in social media, I think that pressure around how Western governments respond to TikTok and whether they allow it. There's been a big stir up just this week. There's a big piece in the New York Times sort of discussing how most US government employees are told they can't have TikTok on their phones now. Like, I think some of that discussion, which has sort of been bubbling away in the background, is going to boil over, and it's a very different. It's not we've been very concerned about the political influence of Facebook and of Twitter when that's happened, but I feel like there's some hard-edged geopolitics there that are going to be interesting for the future of TikTok and how it evolves. But again, doesn't mean it's going to disappear literally overnight, but I do think that's where it might get interesting.
No government that wants Gen Z or millennial votes is going to do anything particularly meaningful to TikTok. They're going to talk about it a lot on the TV news and in newspapers for Gen X and boomers to read, and then they're going to do pretty close to nothing because they still want the young vote, and that's where all the young people are.
I'm not sure that I totally agree with that because I don't see evidence of those governments wanting those votes. Show me one thing that like either the Republicans or the Democrats have done in the US that's remotely aimed to appeal to anyone under the age of 50. It's a fairly short list.
True, but we're now at the point where anybody who wants to win government needs the millennials and younger because we're becoming the biggest demographic. Certainly, the Labor government in Australia needs young people because all the old people are voting Liberal and the weird young rich ones. But thanks to several economic disasters, there aren't many of those. And the Democrats, to a certain extent, need young people because all the old people vote for the Republicans. Any country with a small L liberal-ish government needs young people, and so they will not do anything meaningful to TikTok. Is my prediction. However, in 2007, I predicted that people wouldn't be using Facebook that much because it asks you for too many personal details, and I thought people cared about their privacy too much. I am not always right.
We shall have to revisit this in 12 months' time after the great TikTok implosion of June 2023.
When TikTok
It'd be a
buys out
beautiful
Facebook.
Oh, that would be so entertaining. I want to see that happen. Musk, Zuckerberg spends too much money on the metaverse, building everyone legs, loses his. That would be so funny.
ByteDance swoops in. So 3 years of arguments. But there's some great possibilities there. So.
Yeah. But also, why would ByteDance even want to own Facebook? They just need to wait for all the boomers to die off, and then there'll be no one on Facebook. But I should send my love to boomers. You're a fantastic generation. I don't want you to die. It's just you're the only ones on Facebook. Please like me.
And subscribe.
Well, that just about wraps up this week's episode of Vertical Hold and this year's crop of episodes. Thanks to Alice and Angus for joining us in this special Everyone's Name Starts with the Letter A, did you think about that, episode of Vertical Hold. And, of course, for the last time this year, it's time to wheel out the patented 100% blockchain-free Vertical Hold 3 Questions of Doom. Alice, you can go first. I will ask, as is my usual habit, all 3 questions, and then you can answer them. So, where can people find your work online? Where can they find you on whichever social media platforms you prefer? And a one-time special big contentious question, what's the one thing you'd never give up as a New Year's resolution?
So you can find my work online. You should really subscribe to my Substack, Press Any Button, which I write with Tim Biggs about video games, but also I write for The Oz, Gizmodo, Kotaku, Gadget Guy, and a bunch of other places. And you can find all that on my social media, where on Twitter I'm at AliceDKC, and pretty much everywhere else I'm AliceDKC, except for places where I couldn't be, where I am that AliceDKC. And what would I never give up as a New Year's resolution? It's either potatoes or extremely trashy television.
The moment on social media where you say, I'm giving up potatoes and extremely trashy television, we know that account's been hijacked?
Yes, that's how you know I've been kidnapped and I'm calling for help. Yeah. Like the week that I don't feel the need to comment on what's going on in the L word Generation Q is the week you know I've died.
I feel that is a very, very, very long time away. Gus, same set of questions.
So people can find my work online at finder.com.au. On social media, it still is mostly Twitter, even if I'm using it less, at GusWorldAU. And of my many, many vices, the one that I'm completely not prepared to give up is cheese. Cheese is staying.
Cheese isn't a vice, sir. It's a lifestyle. And as always, you can catch us online at Vertical Hold AU on Twitter. I will work out Vertical Hold on Mastodon, but I haven't done it yet, but you can find me there at least. At verticalhold.com.au on the web, or the Vertical Hold Facebook page.
And once again, thanks for dropping by. Don't forget to tell your friends about us and help us spread the good word. And don't forget, keep Nana away from the spinach at Christmas lunch. Vertical Hold is proudly brought to you by Aussie Broadband, changing the game with their award-winning network and Australian-based support.
What kind of sicko has spinach at Christmas? I mean, like, seriously, when was that going to happen?
I just want to see Nana tripping balls.
I actually buy 1 kilo of spinach from Costco for Christmas lunch, and so
you buy your
that would have
spinach by
gone
the
poorly.
key, your spinach. Yeah. I see where it is.
Are you going to cut it with something or keep it pure?
No, I think I'm just going to have it straight. No, the devil's lettuce.
All right, going to hit stop.
Good stuff.